How you doing? This is John here from Classic Auto Restoration, also known as PiercePartsStore.com. Some of you people may know me from the Stromberg carburetors. What I have here is two Bugatti Type 57 carburetors that I built for customers in Europe. I had some requests to convert the American UUR2s to fit the Bugatti Type 57s, and what we did is we made up all the specific parts to convert one of them carburetors to a Type 57. I had already made the oversized Venturis, and we had to make all the choke linkage, the butterfly, the choke shafts, the throttle shafts, and we had to convert the choke horns to a throttle or choke shaft that is off center. That was one of the most difficult things that we had to deal with. Then what we did is we took these and we calibrated these carburetors for the Type 57 Bugatti. So in turn, what that means is the idle circuit, the power circuit, also known as an economizer, and the main circuit, plus of course the large Venturi. So these two carburetors are ready to be shipped. By the way, just so you know, it is July 2014, so this isn't a video that's 20 years old. This is something that we've just done recently. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test these two carburetors before I ship them on the 32 Pierce Arrow here. We're going to fire it up and run it. Unfortunately, I will not be able to drive the car because the throttle shafts on these carburetors are on the opposite side from what they use on most of the American cars. So it's just not practical for me to try to hook up linkage and all that kind of stuff. But we can run them, we can rev them, we'll check for leaks, we'll look at some of the, make sure that it accelerates properly and all that. And from there, the customer should be able to work with the carburetor. Now, one of the things that I did with these, a little different than what I do with carburetors I do for the States, is I'm setting up both of these customers with a series of jets and oversizes, so what they can do is when they install these on their car, they can try the different jets and find out which one it runs the best with. If I was to do one of these carburetors for a customer here in the United States, I can do the math and I already know from previous carburetors I've done what increases in jet sizes to do to work with our modern ethanol fuel. So for those guys, they'll have to do some of that work themselves, but anybody with a Bugatti is pretty crafty, and most of the mechanics working on them understand how to do all that stuff. So if you come in a little closer, I'll show you some of the details on these carburetors. So some of the things that make this unique from a carburetor that's on most of the American cars is, one, the style of the top of this carburetor and the type of linkage it uses. This is the last version of a Stromberg UUR2. So they started making this carburetor about 1932. So if you want to build something that looks like what came on a Type 57, you have to use the latest version of the carburetor. And what that entails is this tin accelerator pump linkage here. Some of the parts that are specific to the Bugatti is this shaft that runs down to the choke, and what that does is when you choke the carburetor, it actually turns the throttle shaft and gives it a little bit of gas at the same time. The pump cam has a hole in it for that specifically. Like I said before, the butterfly has an offset throttle shaft. This is the only carburetor I've ever seen, or the only UUR2 I've ever seen with that offset throttle shaft. That created a lot of difficulties in moving the holes in the bolt pattern to bolt this linkage on. This linkage, we had to fabricate some of the components and modify some existing stuff, is only available on some of the smaller Stromberg carburetors. I've never seen that on an updraft carburetor. So that was stuff that I had to source from other areas, and then we made the additional parts that were missing. So that seems to be an odd style linkage that they like to use in Europe. I've seen it on a Delage carburetor also. So again, that's something that has to be sourced from other areas. I've made about a dozen sets of parts for these, so in turn I should be able to make about a dozen Type 57 carburetors with the parts that we made. Another interesting thing is they move the throttle lever to the opposite side of the carburetor, and that's something that you can really only do with this late style top. The earlier style tops don't really have access for that. So these cores have been completely sandblasted. The bodies have been completely remachined, so all the surfaces are flat. I actually remachined all the little fiber gasket washer seats, so those are flat. Then from there, the bodies are zinc plated, then they're primed and painted, and when we assemble them, we actually spec everything out toward the particular carburetor, again meaning all the jet sizes and everything else. So hopefully this is something that can be bolted on and driven away with just minor tuning as far as idle mixture screws and accelerator pump screws. Other than that, and maybe some jet changes, they should be happy and raring to go with this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bolt one of these on a carburetor, or excuse me, on a 32 Pierce Arrow. We're going to fire it up, make sure the carburetors run well, there's no leaks and all that, and they're ready to go to the customer. So we'll get this bolted on and we'll come back and we'll see it run.